Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, as much as that chant was first recorded by the followers or the people who thought that this entity, that this that took on this person who took on the name of Chaitanya was a god. That chant means the omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience of the God of light and sound. And you don't have to picture a couple 15-year-old boys running around in fancy pants. One in the yellow pants and the other one in the red pants. You don't have to picture that. So it's a very important chant in that regards. But I watched the lecture series of Prabhupada, and I am going to share, the interviews. I listened to the interviews. I've watched some lectures, but anyways, religion and its media should be tolerated as a way towards sanity and a use of charity that will benefit society. That's why in a lot of countries it's gathered a non-profit status. But primarily the non-profit status goes to Christians, and some countries, so-called new religions, or old religions that just aren't part of the Judeo-Christian paradigm, have been denied such statuses. Scripture is not for a particular race or culture, and there are certainly national or local revelations that have came in the past, but the overall message and the final messages in respect to the direct revelation, the direct inspiration, that is universal. It's not put to be better for a particular race. It's not meant to be better for a particular material culture. We all have our means, and that's how it's expected. Ritual or chant is not enough, because we need to eliminate our sinful life. Although the practice of religion of any sort actually reduces insanity and criminality, but some people it's just, here's a chant I do, and I go to a service once a week or once a day or whatever, and the rest of my life, no. You're supposed to, like Confucius says, ritual is supposed to establish and maintain values. Even those of different paths will recognize a spiritual master, become detached in spending and in acquiring. Once it's done, it's done. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Hari. Share scripture as it is, without the contamination of mere opinions. Now, obviously, if you have a belief, you have an opinion, but your beliefs should be grounded in what is. Either it's what's being transmitted, or you have faith and there's experience and reasoning to back it up. But don't just randomly say things that you are making up on the spot or anything like that. Propaganda and drug treatment is inferior to becoming a devotee and disciple who loves God. And when I've seen this as obvious, you've seen people instantly quit hard drugs. I've witnessed it myself. You get people on a spiritual practice, they're still addicted, and they, so this is one of the benefits of Prabhupada's Krishna consciousness movement. Now, am I saying that his commentary is exactly as is, or the Bhagavad Gita, which has roots of being over 5,000 years old, is actually a late addition to the Mahabharata, which is only a few thousand years old, which happens to be, for some reason, I've recently found out that there's been scientific studies that indicate that we all descend from the same woman about 1,000 years ago. Not 1,000 years ago, about 3,000 years ago, which is, anyways. Subordination and support is of the same class. People are like, oh, women, they're second class in this society. No. The woman's considered, hey, she has a good husband, she supports a good husband, or or some other situation like that. You're not, difference is not that, is not less in the overall sense. In brain and body, we must deny the idea of sameness of male and female. Vedic culture is against women as politicians, and they say that equality is spiritual. And so I must say that there's, I'm bumbling with my words, I'm sorry. So there is some sexism in what remain in the other paths, but I am not promoting that when I say that there's differences. As I said, being a support, it's not, well, it's like a modern society where men take up the majority of the positions of high finance and high politics. It doesn't mean that men are better in doing this. But the support of women are getting some of the credit for that. The consciousness of the living can be shifted. There are places in our physical body, our physical body will never go. Bodies are for the conditions. There are bodies for the conditions of other realms. Our places need to be suitable for the bodies that we have. Those who are of the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance will endure in their respective places. Now, when it comes to psychic and spiritual realms, it's definitely believed that we will not be in a place that we're unworthy to be, and that we will not be at a place where we're not supposed to be in that sense. People fall for false masters because they want easy answers. Emotional illness comes from dating and wasting time. Replacing marriage and devotional service. And while I'm going through this before the chant, and I'm open for questions in these live feeds, except in the middle of a ritual. Beware of identifying with the body too much. We have to operate the body. We're male or female or whatever we are in this form, but it goes beyond that. Distinguish between the spiritual, the mental, and the material manifestations. Material progress and succession are peace are not, they're not the same thing. Realize the universal, the local, and supreme. And I mean, food's a perfect example for this. There's some things that aren't good for anybody. And then there's the wholesome, and then there's, the local sorts of things. Me, and pretty much everybody who's light colored like me, has issues with dairy. 60% of the world has significant issues digesting dairy. But just, that just means it's unwholesome for us. There's about 10 people. It's a perfectly fine food if you don't overeat. We are consciousness. We are spirit soul. And personality. Relate to God and creation with each of those. Find proper direction towards being completely spiritual. That doesn't mean you can't have a regular job. Although there's a lot of criticism that here in these interviews that he's responding to is, well, these people aren't doing anything material. But, why should you have to overwork yourself all the time? Just, I've seen people very stressed to have big houses. And then I've seen people very stressed to be poor. Serious disciples should be taken seriously. And now, comment, question, all you want on what I have to say. Here in Facebook or wherever I'm posting, I'm open to that. But if someone's going to ask personal direction, at least try to make it sound like you saw the video or read the thing that you commented on. And that should go for other people's channels as well. Just don't troll and I haven't seen this, I don't care what it says, I'm going to make a comment that has nothing to do with it. If I've made a video that has answered a question, and the same thing with Prabhupada. It's like, if you don't care what the Bhagavad Gita and all this other stuff says, and there's whole chapters you can look at, it's like, why should he take students for personal connection, for the personal time, when he could do something for everybody, when they're not showing that seriousness of learning and practice and stuff like that. Simplicity is often needed for much contemplation to occur. Now, there's different types of renounced life, but we don't need as many things as people think as we do in society. Once you realize the difference between needs and wants, it allows you to, whether you have not enough or more than you need, to spend that time in thinking, in connecting, which is the meaning for yoga, by the way, that connecting. It's not just stretching and breathing and making whatever funny sound that doesn't have any meaning. That's not yoga. There's more to yoga than that. It's like a word for religion, just like Tantra is a word for religion. And during one of these lectures, they heard a conch shell blowing. And the conch shell blowing symbols an auspiciousness. So after there was a ritual or a prayer, people would go and blow that. And people would be reminded, hey, this one really counted. Spirituality provides answers that science doesn't. And that's not saying that we detach from the material science. That is saying that there's more than just what is established. Pretty much everything in our lives relies on some degree of, if not faith, belief, because we're not verifying these facts for ourselves. Even our use of language relies on others that we just trust. But trust and verify, people. Trust and verify. Sentiment and status are not the same as truth. And that's one of the ridiculous things we have going on nowadays, is this idea that all these different paths are equally true. If their claims about the physical world are not all exactly the same, that's a good indication that their value of goodness or whatever is not relative. Oh, it's his path, so he gets to torture animals to death, but I'm going to be nice to animals, or whatever the example. Know God through creation, and the creation through God. Vedic scripture speaks of the soul as being a 10,000th the width of a hair. Now, that refers to different things, obviously, because the blonde hair is the thinner of the hair. These people have more hairs. And then there's, the red, and the darker colors have more, people have less hair and there's thicker hair. And then there's, like beard hair is thicker than hair on top of the head. But anyways, it's a very small, a myriad of souls in the thickness of a hair. But it's the typical, you find it in the Bhagavatam. I think there's a quote in the Bhagavad Gita, or at least there's references to where it is, and other, this guy memorized shells worth of books and only had his reproduction of some of it. I did that one last. Without religion, humans are just animals. Well, animals automatically connect. They don't even have to think of it. Whether it's a vegan animal, or whether it's a carnivore or a scavenger, whatever these animals, they're just, they're perfect as is. At least that's not the Vedic position. That's the idea, is that they have a lower status in life. Where a path doesn't seek true God consciousness, or is disobeying God, it is not religious. I've talked much about the difference between church and religion. Religion is that pure connection. Whatever your opinion of religion, it is that relationship. And if it's a deviation from that relationship with God and created, then, not about mentioning. Oh, the best of the nine. Oh, the mentioning about and hearing are said to be the best of the 9 types of devotional duty. I don't know where to find the rest of the list. This is just something he said. Truth and good is not the sole property of any path. Now, I can say that Islamic, in saying that word, intends everything that's good and true, and not anything that's evil or ignorant. But am I saying that a Christian or a Jew or a Hindu, as us in the West like to call them, that truth doesn't belong to their faith? It does. A change in body does not mean a change in soul. But it can be. We can change for the better or the worst as time goes on, or when we die, or something. But anyways, don't let change perplex you, because you are aware of the spirit soul. Aleister Crowley, his last words, as he slipped into unconsciousness, overdosing from heroin at the age of 72, after using it for 50 years, said, "I am perplexed." So you want to be at a state where you're not going to be perplexed when you go out. Spiritual is often strange to the material-minded. Attention getting is often part of preaching. But does that mean, for example, it's like people talk about the charity giving. You give openly and secretly. You do things in public and private. You don't just, it's time to pray, so I have to go out in the middle of the park and do it in front of everybody. Well, if that time comes and that's what you're doing, yeah, but there's a difference between being willing to draw attention and just showing off to the point where, you know, leaders should not choose on a whim the successors. And particularly with the prophets, if there's any information, they either gave guidance to the community to help their community decide, or it was, but it wasn't, just, oh, I'm going to pick my best friend, that sort of thing, and for no other reason, we can't figure out why, or a family member or something. That's not how it goes. God's way should decide leaders by qualification and testing. A devotee must consult God in everything, but the lesser devotees should consult the authorized leaders, the mystics and the scholars and stuff, I guess. But so that's sort of obvious. How do we consult? Well, what we've received of the direct revelation, the direct inspiration to the messenger, the exemplar prophets, and by mystic, particularly somebody who would in English be considered prophet because of their confirmatory experiences, but not in the way that, oh, everybody has to follow them in their way. Their way is unique to them often. God consciousness and its approach will not be for all, but all can so use their intelligence. And Prabhupada talked about rascals and all that sort of stuff. And the unintelligent was another way that he expressed this matter. And so we look at this and we say, what did he mean by this? This wasn't just like what you hear in church. Until 1967, the Catholics referred to all monotheists as pagan. They referred to all non-Christians as pagan and heathen. They referred to certain other types of Christians as even being amongst that at times. And no, the rascal who's just following his desires unguided, the unintelligent, the one who doesn't consider right and wrong in that respect, that these people can be very smart. Some of the most insane and criminal people have rationalized away, but they're not using their intelligence correctly. Always be prepared to die. And these thoughts are going to seem jumbled because I don't know how many hours this series was, and I'm just writing down, I may listen to a couple hours and only say a few sentences. The platforms aren't the same, the material platform or the business platform or the spiritual platform, or, but the work can seem the same. The consciousness at the point of death is essential. The Bhaktivedanta, it's one of the blue books. It's out of sight. I don't know. The Srimad Bhaktivedanta tells the story of this guy who inadvertently named his son Narayan, and at the moment of death, he was thinking about his son. But he stopped thinking about his son. He automatically said his son's name, but he wasn't thinking about his son anymore. He was thinking about God. Narayan, Narayan. And then came the Yamadutas and the Vishnudutas, the angels of punishment and the angels of preservation. And they didn't know who to put. And it's like, he died in the status of remembering God. He involved himself in a prostitute. Or maybe he had a girlfriend. It was the same thing in that culture. And, because what he was at the end. So, very important. because it determines your status, and it does something about your status in the afterlife. But don't rely on deathbed repentance. It rarely works that way. Spiritual leaders should not invent the obligations. Now, particularly my research with Ekankar, which has some influence from Hinduism, largely through the Radha Swami movement, but some of it through independent research of Paul Twitchell, Harold Klemp, and I'm not sure if Darwin Gross did any of that, but any independent research in that respect, in that field. But they're particularly Paul Twitchell and Harold Klemp, they were like, well, I haven't changed it yet, and always coming up with new spiritual exercises and stuff like that. That's not how it should be. That doesn't mean you can't make up you can't compose voluntary things or try to figure out very specific things. But it's like some of the rituals I post and stuff. It's like, that's my voluntary expression for the time. I'm not saying that's obliged on anyone. The property of others should be treated with the same respect as one's own. Spiritual law that has no governmental punishment is still to be followed as prescribed. And there's a word in Sanskrit-based languages, the Shariat, or the Sharia, that means the path by the still waters, or the middle path, or something like that. And it's basically what they refer to their laws as. And the Arabic-based languages have the same thing. And people confuse the difference between religious law and the law of the land. No matter how so-called religiously minded the country is, even if it really is a theocracy, most of the spiritual law is not enforced by the government. That's a huge misconception that us in the West often end up doing. It is often best to preach where it's hostile to the teachings. There's been people advertising militias and stuff, people with signs by the side of the road, whether it's hate or just ignorance of one sort or another, that they're completely against certain aspects of truth. Not that that's their intention. And you just say a little bit. It can stop. It may not even usually work, but occasionally it will work. Or it will take the edge off of, maybe we need to do something about these people. We need to bomb a synagogue or a masjid or something like that, because no. Often these people, they don't know. They don't know what's in their own books. And we say something. Or if you just say stuff in general, people, I'm in a country that's considered very hostile to the 45% of the country that's not Christian. To the fact that most of us are pressured into saying Merry Christmas and stuff like this. I personally don't, but I don't use it as a greeting and that sort of thing. I do report what is said, but anyways, to know God is needed to properly love God. Just don't worship for material gain when God provides. Now, there are prayers, give us our daily bread, we can pray for things, but it should be more of a, things are difficult, so I'm not going to be grateful, or I'm not going to pray. If you forget yourself when you're praying, whether you're praying for others or not, if you forget your needs and your wants and you pray for other reasons, there's, things are going to happen. If all could have sufficient inner guidance, there would not be a teacher talking of inner guides. And we find this in a lot of cults, that they, there was even a book, the book of why we should have no books and stuff like this. And you have to figure out, well, what's the proper guidance of the inner guidance? There's the book of ourselves, or the book of nature, and we look at the book of ourselves deep inside ourselves like that. But, don't listen to every voice. Well, fine, you can listen to everybody, but don't listen to every voice and say, I gotta do that, the voices in my head said to do it. You end up like a particular person, which I will go into detail about at some point, and jumping off a bridge, getting naked in the airport, causing disturbances before you get naked at the airport, saying all sorts of stuff because the inner voices tell you that it's true. It's like, you tell those voices no. In the uncivilized, eating is indiscriminate and merely to satisfy the taste. Just because you like how something tastes, or I feel like eating. You eat what you need to eat, and you pay attention to what you're eating. A person should not be given status upon birth alone, but by their own behavior is class. And after this last one, I will do a round of the chant to the omnipotent, the omnipotent, the omniscient, the omnipresent, the all attractive, the source of light, the all pleasurable, the source of sound. Avoid suspicion. Beware of illusory freedom. A lot of freedom in modern society either mistreats people or it keeps, it's like, okay, we're going to, instead of giving them less freedom and giving them security and more opportunity for well-being, we're going to give them all this freedom. So, got to be careful of that sort of thing. Life is not something for wasting time. We are to identify as soul and go beyond filling our life trying to earn fruitive results or even psychological, mental development. It is important to select of the most serious and potentially productive students. I have a playlist that I actually talk about somebody who was a student in a way for years, that I met in 2007, April 1st. It is The Blonde Stranger in the Creek is that playlist, so I've represented my interaction and lessons to her in that. It is important to not just be an innovator, but one who continues in the actual knowledge and wisdom traditions. So I will close with a round to let you know how long it's going to take to do one round, which there will be 16 a day, and disciples of the Krishna consciousness movement. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Rami. Hari Rama, Hari Hari Krishna, Krishna, Hari Rama, Hari Hari Krishna, Krishna, Hari Rama, Hari Krishna, Krishna, Hari Rama, Hari Krishna, Krishna, Hari Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hari Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hari Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hari 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 Rama, Hari. Now, that was supposed to be 108 times, and I will double check these beads when the feed ends. But, 108 times 16. And so it does not have to be personified. I'm not encouraging that. If you want to personify these concepts and such, well, that's certainly up to you. So all hail, all hail, all hail to the potency of the divine, which is known through the vibrations